We're up to what I think is the trickiest part of this entire build of Trixie, my HZ 1-tonner. And that is lifting off the cab. So this video is about that adventure, which I haven't 100% planned out yet. Before I get the rest of these cab mounting bolts out, I wanted to get the doors off, and I was a little bit worried about how to do that because I've got 2 broken shoulders from mountain bike accidents, and they don't cope very well with sudden changes in weight. Now, I know a lot of you guys who have done this before will use like a jack or chassis stands under the door to support its weight, but because there's that thin seam underneath the door, I was a bit worried that it would teeter around and I wouldn't be able to manage the weight. So I ended up using an engine hoist. But anyway, it all worked out easier than I thought, and here's a little bit of how it happened. There's 2 cab mounting bolts at the back of the cab, and then there's 4 at the front, 2 on each side. I've already undone the one under here, but there's one in there that needs to come out. A lot of these mounting points can be quite rusted out, but that's now 4 of these I've pulled out, and they've really only had a little bit of dirt and rust on them, so I'm really hoping that the cab just needs a bit of a clean-up around the mounting points and some rust proofing, and that I won't have to cut out and weld in new bits of metal for where the mounting points are. Ugh. That's making my shoulder crunch. Maybe a bit of libby-doob. So those cab mounting bolts at the front, you can kind of see the top side of them through this access hole in the firewall. I can see that one to the left there, which is the one that's a bit too hard for me to get undone. I'm just going to spray some WD-40 on that and hope it loosens up a bit. And the one I've already got out, can you see that one? There it is. Oh, there we go. It's complaining a bit. Out she comes. There we have it. Last one. How's she looking? Same all round. But we don't see the full story until the cab's off. So when you go looking, there's not actually a lot of advice on the internet about how to lift the cab off a tonner. All I've come across so far is Shanky Garage, where Sam rigged up a bit of a hoist from the roof of his shed to lift his cab off. On the Shed Sesh channel, he had the engine and drivetrain out for a start, so he could put I think a great big chunk of timber down the tunnel and jacked that up and kind of built a frame to support the cab as he went. And on the Cars and Things channel, he had 4 mates lift it off for him. So I'm kind of short on 4 strong mates at the moment that can come and help. And I've also left the engine and the gearbox and drive shaft in the car, because I'm not really sure what I'm going to do in that respect yet, whether I'm going to pull all that apart to work on the chassis or not. I've still got the windows, the windscreen and the rear window in as well, which adds a little bit of weight. And I haven't quite got the space in this shed to centre the car underneath the strongest part of the roof, so hoisting it up that way is not really an option. So I've had to come up with a different plan. But I have got the cab separated from the chassis, so let me show you how that looks and what I did to get there. So I used this little trolley jack and a couple of bits of timber, and I got that set up under that cross member and just jacked it up enough until that, I guess you'd call it some stiction between the cab mounting rubbers and the chassis, till that kind of broke free and the cab started lifting a little bit. So just gently kept lifting it and got some just random chunks of timber to sit in between the chassis and the cab, pretty much where the mounting points are. So that at the front, and then at the back, just some old chunks there. That's not how it's staying, obviously. Pretty much I've got to get this cab high enough for it to clear the fuel tank, I think, or pretty much the fuel tank, but the highest point, or maybe it's more the tray mounting areas that it's got to get high enough for, because the idea is that when that cab is balanced up on those 4 chassis stands, that I should be able to just slide this chassis, or I guess roll the chassis right out onto the grass there, and then be able to get that dolly out and move the cab gently back down onto the dolly, slide the cab out of the way. Clearly I have to make some space for it, and then I'll be able to roll the chassis back into this same position that it's in. That's the plan. I guess soon enough we'll find out what happens in reality. Well, there the cab was, and there the cab is, mounted neatly on the dolly that Sam from Shenky Garage made and sold to me. Thank you, Sam. That worked really well. It took a minor bit of effort to get it aligned up, but the cab went down perfectly. I'm not sure if I've got it on back to front or not, but it's stable and I can move it around the workshop, which is all I really need. It all came together really well. It took us a couple of hours from start to finish. We did use the method that we'd planned of a combination of chassis stands and timber blocks to lift the cab, and we did it very iteratively. Just lifted it slowly, one corner at a time, until it was high enough to clear the chassis. We had to roll the chassis out of the garage or the shed and then down a slope a little bit, which kind of lifted the back of the chassis up, if you know what I mean. And that meant we had to do a bit of fine tuning of the cab height toward the end there, so the chassis just didn't knock it off. That all went fine. I think the important thing, even though it was a really dodgy game of Jenga, I think the important thing was that we took our time, we were very deliberate and careful and checking it and not rushing. And it did work out okay. So yeah, my husband was doing this with me. He did all the heavy lifting. I have a back injury from a dirt bike accident in my youth, and now as I'm getting older it's flaring up. So he was great, and he did all the lifting of the cab while I was putting the blocks under each corner as we lifted it. Lowering it back down onto the dolly was easier actually than lifting it up. I think we kind of figured out our method lifting it, and then it was really just the reverse of that, which was quite systematic to get it back down. And it didn't take much effort at all to line up the dolly with the cab when we lowered it. chassis. Looks pretty nice. A little bit of surface rust there, but a lot of this is actually just dirt. And the cab mounting points, again, all this stuff is just dirt and they look pretty good. Again, bit of surface rust there, but I think they'll clean up really nice. Well, I had a strip disc on the grinder already, so I'm just going to use that instead of a wire wheel. This is mostly what I used actually to get the surface rust out of the cab floor, so yeah, it should do. Well, that's the front passenger side mounting holes cleaned up. That one's really good. This one just has a bit of pitting, but it's really not that deep at all. And I did take some pictures underneath the cab of the mounting points there, and they all look fine too. In fact, there's still some shiny metal under some of it, which amazed me. Yeah, I'd call that pretty good. I may still find a nasty surprise every here and there, but given that everywhere that this chassis and that cab is supposed to rust, it's really been like minimal. Did I get very lucky with this? I would have liked to have said to you that in hindsight, it could have been a one-person job, but I really don't think it could have. We needed the two of us coordinating on each corner of the cab as we were lifting and chocking it up. Lifting it with a hoist is the best option, and I wished I'd been able to do that. So excuse me, I'm a sweaty mess. You might be able to hear, can you hear some thunder rumbling in the background? There's a storm brewing, because it has been a stinking hot day and quite an uncomfortable day to do a job as physical as this one. I don't know if you got anything out of this video at all, other than maybe some mild entertainment if you've made it this far through. It's not a method I would necessarily recommend that you try unless you're in a situation like us where we just didn't have any other options. I don't know what's going to be the next thing I work on for the tonner or what the next video will be about. It's likely I'll probably do something with the motorbike as a next video. But until then, really happy to read your comments and any suggestions you have for this build. And yeah, see you in the next video.